Thank you, Speaker, and I thank the Prime Minister and the Opposition Leader for those beautiful words about our friend Simon Crean. The Opposition Leader and the Prime Minister are right. There are a handful of people who you can genuinely describe as a giant of the Australian Labor Party, and Simon Crean was one of them. He was an icon of our movement, and he was integral to almost everything that happened in Australian politics and industrial relations for a period of almost 40 years. And he was my mentor and he was my friend. Simon's length of service to our nation was extraordinary. He served in national leadership roles in the union movement. He then served 8 terms as the member for Hawke, and he was the only person to serve as a minister across the Hawke, Keating, Rudd and Gillard governments. He achieved big, great things, and he made our country better and fairer. He was a reformer, a thinker, a doer, a negotiator, a politician who brought a good mind and a good heart to every task. And his service to my community in south-east Melbourne is the stuff of legend. In the suburbs of Hawke, he's worshipped as a hero, and we owe him a great deal. Simon served Hawke for 23 years of his life. His name is on a hall in every single one of Hawke's schools. It is on plaques, it is on parks, it is on public buildings. But it's not the investment and the dollars and the infrastructure that people remember about Simon. What people remember is about Simon himself, how he treated them and how he made them feel. Everywhere I go in my community, people tell me a story about Simon Crean, about how he respected them, how he listened to them, and no matter how high he flew in politics, he treated everyone he met as his equal. He was egalitarian to his core, equally at home in the suburbs or in a country town, on the factory floor or in the boardroom, at the footy or at the opera. Equally at home, speaking to a pensioner in Oakley or Clayton as speaking to Australia's Prime Minister. To Simon, everyone mattered and everyone's opinion mattered, and my constituents knew it because you could feel it when he talked to you. He was a politician of the old school. Simon had a long history of supporting women in the Labor Party, and it's thankfully very common today to see people in leadership positions reaching out and supporting young women in the party. But when Simon started out in politics, that was incredibly rare. He joined the union movement when there were barely any women in senior positions within the union movement or the Labor Party. And that changed because people like Simon stood up and advocated for it, and I will forever be grateful for that. Simon helped me tremendously in my life in politics. He was the first politician I ever met pretty soon after I joined the Labor Party as a teenager. When I was 22, I ran for council in the city of Greater Dandenong, and Simon reached out and supported me, and at the time he was leader of the opposition. There was absolutely no need for him to do this. There was nothing to gain. Supporting the bid of a young person on your local council might sound like a small thing outside of this chamber, unless you know something about the fight-to-the-death, maximum-pain blood sport that is south-east Melbourne intrafactional Labor politics. In the council ward I was contesting, from memory there were 9 candidates. 6 were members of different Labor Party sub-factions. There was nothing in this for Simon Crean, but he stood behind me and beside me because he believed I could do it, and he wanted to help a young woman in the Labor Party. And he offered me that support through my entire life in politics. Now, we all know something in this chamber about the nature of friendship in politics. The friendships that are real are the one where the person is still standing by your side when it costs them something. And that's the sort of person that Simon was. He was loyal to me, to his friends, to his union, to his party and to his country. Much has been said about Simon's decision to lead Labor to oppose the war in Iraq. And it's really hard to remember how profoundly countercultural that was to the politics of the moment. It was politically almost unthinkable what he did. It was gutsy and honest, and it was true, and it was right. And the principles you saw when Simon opposed the war in Iraq, they weren't a surprise to the many of us that knew him, because that was actually how Simon lived every single one of his days in politics. What mattered to Simon wasn't what was popular, it was what was right, and there is no truer definition of leadership than that. Most of us in this chamber knew Simon as a politician. He was profoundly and deeply devoted to his work, but that devotion did not come close to the commitment he had to his family, to his wife Carol, to his beautiful children and his gorgeous grandson. His family was the cornerstone of what he was as a person. Politics can be very hard on a marriage, but you would never know that looking at Simon and Carol. They were as much in love in their 70s as they were when they met as teenagers playing tennis. Simon and Carol had the kind of completely bonded adoration for one another, where they were so much together in life that you often couldn't tell where one person ended and the other began. He was a devoted father, grandfather and husband, and I know this is an intensely sad time for Simon's family, and I know I speak for the Parliament when I say my thoughts are with them. Simon Crean lived a worthy life of intense meaning in so many ways, and we will all miss him terribly. Vale.